A father haunted by the ghosts of war. A determination to understand the past. What really happened in the jungles of Burma. A story finally told. A bond pieced back together. The untold story of Merrill's Marauders. And a daughter who never stopped listening. Join the story of the past, the Marauder and his daughter.
Today we're visiting with a very special lady, Mrs. Linda S. Cunningham, and she is the writer and author of a book called The Marauder and His Daughter. This is just stunning. It's unbelievable. So, Linda, welcome, and thank you for writing this.
Thank you for inviting me here.
Oh, my pleasure, my absolute pleasure. So, Linda came to us through Rachel, and it was just so wonderful to know that there's somebody around here that wrote this book. This book needed to be written. It's a book about history, but it's more about her dad and about her dad sharing what he did during the Second World War, which I think is wonderful. And my dad was also in the Second World War. I have very little knowledge. He would not talk about it. So I think this is wonderful that would happen. So let's just dive right into this, okay?
Okay.
So let's talk about the Marauder and his daughter.
It began when I found my father's 1944 diary in the attic. I was just a child then, and I didn't know what I was reading, and the print was so small, I couldn't read it. And I talked to my dad. I didn't let him know I saw that diary. I would have gotten in trouble over that. But my dad wouldn't talk about it, just like yours. My dad would not talk about it.
Yeah.
And not until I was an adult, I found the diary again, and I persisted. I said, Dad, this is your legacy and the legacy of Merrill's Marauders. And this is historical. This is a first-hand source of history.
Sure.
I said, this needs to be out there, and this needs to be shared with everyone in the United States.
Wow. Well, the story is about your dad and a group of, what were they, Rangers or?
Right. They were Rangers for, they called them Marauders.
Yeah.
They were on a secret mission, and President Roosevelt is the one that called for volunteers for this secret mission.
Oh, really?
And they were 3,000 volunteers.
Wow. Wow. And they were sent to which? To
Burma.
Burma.
Now, the purpose of that was that they were trying to oust the Japanese from Burma, and the Lido Road from China was necessary to ferry supplies. And so they were trying to open that Lido Road up, and they were also trying to take the airstrip at Missional so that the Japanese wouldn't have that advantage, and we could use that for our advantage.
So the Japanese were trying to expand the war.
Correct.
And they were using that road, that bridge, as a means to get the material and stuff that they needed. And the Marauders' mission was to stop that, right?
Right. We were to stop the Japanese and open that road up because the planes had to fly the hump over the Himalayas to get supplies into other areas like Missional.
And that's a tough thing to do, especially in those days. The Himalayas are so tall that,
and there, when the planes couldn't fly, when the weather was not cooperating, the men didn't get their airdrop and they didn't eat.
Wow.
All of their rations were dropped to them. And sometimes they were able to shoot game or something, but for the most part, they were 25 miles behind Japanese lines. So they were a secret mission, and they had to be quiet.
Yeah.
And the report of a rifle would alert the Japanese,
Right,
so they couldn't really...
it's hard to hunt game, right?
Right. So when they didn't drop supplies, they didn't eat. And my father lost 50 pounds.
50 pounds.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So what is amazing about these Marauders was that, when I transcribed my diaries with my dad, we were transported into the world and horrors of warfare. Jungle warfare. Yeah. And he tested me at first to see if I was going to be able to take it. And he took a story out of context, and he told me about it. And I didn't blink, but I couldn't speak afterwards.
Wow.
But he knew I was going to be able to take the horrors of what he went through, and he didn't hold back. And they also had to watch out for cobras and kraits, all the snakes of the jungle, as well as tigers and wild animals.
Right.
And in fact, he was on guard at a waterhole, and a tiger came up, and he said it was so magnificent he couldn't shoot it. And of course he could, and the tiger could leap over that hole and kill him. But my dad was in awe of this tiger. And so when he got back to the guys and told them about it, they said, well, you probably smelled so much like the jungle that he didn't know you were human.
Didn't realize you were there.
Right.
Wow. So the tiger lived for another day.
Right.
And he got to see a magnificent beast.
He did.
That's incredible.
He did.
So the book actually goes all the way through, right? It takes
Yes, it does.
it takes you through the from the beginning of I guess when they volunteered for it all the way up.
Well, he volunteered. They were over there in November.
Right.
And then they were, practicing war games and jungle warfare.
Right.
They were practicing in the jungles. They didn't start towards their staging area until February. And so my father was over there until the end of May 24th. And then he developed scrub typhus, which is a mite. They called it mite typhus. It has a Japanese name, but I can't pronounce it.
Right.
So I'm not going to try. But anyway, it's from the larval mites that they got from the Himalayas. It was infested with them. And my father got typhus and had 106 fever. And so the May 24th, they got him to India.
Wow.
And that's where he recovered for 2 months because he relapsed. But the scrub typhus was so bad that they brought doctors in from Great Britain because they thought it was a resurgence of the bubonic plague.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, 149 marauders had scrub typhus, and 140 died.
Oh, wow. But your dad was one of the survivors.
My dad was one of the survivors.
Tough guy. How many marauders were there?
3,000. Well, to be specific, 2,997.
Okay.
And about 250 of them were at the headquarters in Lido,
Okay.
India,
So
Assam, India.
So about 2,700 were out in the field.
And they were divided into 3 battalions, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Battalion. And each one of the battalions were color-coded. My dad was in orange combat team, but the 3rd Battalion was orange and khaki. And my dad was...
he was orange.
He was orange, yes.
So that's how they could tell which battalion they were.
Right.
They belonged to.
Originally were A, B, and C shipments because it was a secret mission, and that sounds like supplies rather than troops.
Right.
So so it was confusing. And Merrill's Marauders was originally named the 5307th Composite Unit Provisional. And James Shipley from Time magazine back in the 40s renamed them Merrill's Marauders after their commander, General Frank Merrill.
Got you.
Yeah.
So they were made up of a composite battalion or squadron? No, it's much more.
The whole
squadron.
unit.
The whole unit, yeah.
Volunteers from all over the United States and the ones that had jungle warfare training in Panama and the Caribbean and things like
okay.
that. So they pulled them from everywhere.
Okay, got you.
So
these guys all volunteered for that mission.
they thought they were going to be out in 90 days is what they told them.
Bless your horse. Yeah, it never works out that way, right?
No, it doesn't.
So, so your dad, he gets the mite fever or whatever you call it. He goes out, and then what happens?
After he had typhus fever, he that's when he was in the hospital and he didn't have to go back into the battle because he was too severely sick.
Right.
And he stayed 2 months over there and then he came back. And of course, this is also a love story between my parents. And they communicated by letters. You know, we didn't have cell phones and things like that back then.
Yeah.
So they communicated with letters, but she did not know where he was and she couldn't communicate with him at this point when he was in Burma.
So he could just write her.
Right.
Typical World War II love story, right?
Right.
On that respect.
It's a beautiful love story. It's very romantic. And my mother, it also goes through her experiences. She was a wartime bride.
Yeah, sure.
And then there was one point where she received an MIA telegram.
Really?
Yes, she received a telegram that he was MIA and missing in action.
Right.
And she just went to bed and they were married then. And then about a week later, she gets another telegram. They found him in the hospital.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
With,
what a
typhus,
relief, huh?
With
yeah,
typhus,
but he was
that was
sick.
so deadly that was fearful as well. But my father had other experiences over there and this whole war thing just brought him closer to God. And it was a kind of a spiritual awakening for him because he was hit in the chest. He was in his foxhole and he was hit in the chest by a round over his heart. And I had never heard this story until I went to the cardiologist's office with him. And he asked the cardiologist, he said, "Did this cause my heart damage?" And the doctor said, "No. It was probably the 106 fever you had with typhus fever."
Right.
He had malaria as well. And but the round hit him in the chest and it didn't penetrate. And
Really?
so for so long, he pondered God's perfect timing, because if that Japanese soldier had been one step closer, that round would have penetrated.
Wow.
He was also blown up in a tree burst, and he was thrown up in the air, and he had shrapnel to his groin.
Sure.
And he said he was crawling to a foxhole to somebody his buddy that was hit in the back, and I was crawling over there to stitch up his back, because when the medics couldn't get there, these marauders did it themselves.
Yeah, they had to do the work themselves. Right.
They had to do it themselves. And he said he was blown up in the air, and that's when he got the shrapnel to the groin. But, what's so dangerous with these airbursts, well, first comes in the nuclear heat, and then, you have your shrapnel, and then splinters from the trees, and all of this flying around.
Right.
And then, of course, when you're blown up, you don't know whether you're going to be impaled on a bamboo when you come down.
Sure.
Or hit a tree with all the limbs and break your body up. But he did come down in the thatch in the jungle, and he survived that as well. And then he had shrapnel to his back shoulder as well.
Wow.
So, but that's not unusual. All the men were suffering from that sort of thing.
Wow.
And suffering from diseases. And yet these men fought with courage and esprit de corps because there was no replacements for these guys. They knew they were expendable.
That was it.
That was it. They were going to fight their way out. And they did that. And they kept their focus.
Right.
And I just, the more I read about it, I was absolutely enthralled and amazed at how these men can stay focused when it comes down to survival.
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing.
Yeah, and that you're absolutely right. So in the end result, Merrill's Marauders started in at 2,997 men, right? Is that correct? And ended up with how many?
It's hard to say.
Okay.
Because many of the men had diseases and they came back to the States and
succumbed
many
later, yeah.
died from that. So nobody's really told us. I know at the airstrip at Missional, there were 130 men left standing. That was from one of the battalions that went in there. So there was 130 there. And then they decided to go and take the town of Missional because it was a Japanese stronghold. And so they had 200 men that was convalescing in the hospitals go back into battle.
Really?
Yes, and go back into battle and fight. And then the Mars Task Force, they sent over the Mars Task Force, and we fought with the Chinese as well.
Right.
And so they all went in, and the British, the Gurkhas, they were there. The Chendits, that's the natives, they were there as well. They were all fighting for Burma.
Wow.
And it's just a remarkable story that these men survived.
I remember many, many, many years back, maybe in the 70s. It's been a long time ago. I remember there was a black and white film short, more or less, and they called it the Burma Road or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I guess it was that. It was that group, that time, that mission. Mm-hmm. How impressive.
Right.
Wow. So the book, I'm going to hold it up, The Marauder and His Daughter. If you can see it, folks, but there it is. The Marauder and His Daughter. This book was written by Linda Cunningham, who's our guest, and it's actually not out yet. It's coming out on Veterans Day.
On Veterans Day.
So when you hear this, this will air on Veterans Day during our special, that's the day it comes out. So, and will they be able to find this book?
Well, the pre-sale is Saturday, November the 11th, Veterans Day.
Okay.
And it will be on Amazon. They can order it on Amazon.
Okay.
And that's the pre-sale.
Okay.
But the actual launch of the book is going to be December the 10th through the 17th.
Oh, okay.
So they have from the 11th through the 17th to purchase it.
So you have a little over a month to go ahead and purchase it.
And but it will be on Amazon. And I'm just asking everyone to support this effort because I'm trying to put Merrill's Marauders on the national stage. And my marketing team believes that this book can go to the bestsellers list. And in fact, there's going to be a lighted advertisement on one of the buildings in Times Square.
Wow.
And so they're going all out on this book. But you know what? That sounds grand and everything, but it takes individuals. It takes
so true,
every person to support this effort because these men, this was a secret mission, and many people in the United States did not hear about it. And they won the Congressional Gold Medal.
Wow.
And they were the 172nd recipient of the Congressional Gold Medal since George Washington.
My goodness gracious.
So.
The Marauder and His Daughter, a memoir from the 1944 diary of Merrill's Marauder, Larry W. Stevenson. And this is written by Linda S. Cunningham, his daughter. And if you don't mind if I do a few little things here?
Sure, go ahead.
For the great men who were the legendary Merrill's Marauders, and especially my father, Marauder, Larry W. Stevenson, and his family. That's the dedication on the book. And then there's this quote, your subconscious in your body are more in tune with the divine than your mind will ever understand. How true that is. Wow, this is very, very, very interesting. I told Linda that I'm going to charge her a book for doing this interview because, but I would truly love to have a copy of this book, and I'll probably order one from Amazon. But you said it was a spiritual awakening for your father.
Yes,
And
yes, it was.
and in what ways did that change him?
He became, well, he admitted, he says, I wouldn't have gotten through this if God hadn't been with him. And he says, Jesus was there. He marched in the jungle with me. And,
Wow.
when you have near misses, and he relates many, many stories of when he's on point and he has to cross a river and he's got the responsibility of his men behind him. And, in his diary, he is praying. He writes his prayers in there. And it's very, very
Wow.
touching. It's very touching.
I bet
because
it is.
when you're faced with your mortality at the next turn of the corner of the trail,
No, I get
you
it.
are close to
He's bearing
your
his
Creator.
soul in that journal.
He was.
Wow.
And in fact, when I was writing it, I was so into it that I would wake up at night and scream. I'd be screaming in my sleep. And my husband said, look, you've got to put that down for a while.
Right.
But it's just horrible what these men went through. And that's why on Veterans Day, it is so important that we show our appreciation, because these guys go through this all the time in warfare.
This is one group of men, one battle, one period of time, and there's been so many since then, right?
Yes.
No, you're so right about that. How did this event change you, your family, and your father?
Well, my father passed away in 1993,
Okay.
but my family is just absolutely amazed at what he went through, because he wouldn't speak to anybody about it.
Right.
And he always encouraged me in my writing. And he said, Lindy, now you can write the heck out of this story. After we transcribed his diary, he encouraged me for so long in my writing. And he was pleased that I was interested. And I never stopped listening to him. I was the only one I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and I was the only one interested in all of this. And I was just very curious, maybe because I found that diary. I found his war memorabilia.
Right.
And but he wouldn't talk about it, and he finally opened up to me, and they were absolutely amazed at what he went through, because he had never talked about it to them.
Yeah, that's incredible. It really is. Just the war, folks, as you know, is horrendous, and a lot of times we don't appreciate what people have gone through, for our freedom,
Exactly.
Yeah. So
The sacrifices they make.
Yeah.
And their families. See, my father came home with PTSD, of course, as probably all of them did.
Sure.
And so I grew up with a father with PTSD. And that was an acronym of a term that wasn't even coined back in the 40s.
Yeah. My dad called it shell shock.
Yeah.
Right?
Or battle fatigue.
Or battle fatigue, right.
And so they didn't know about PTSD. And then we just had events that I share in the book of the examples of all the events that happened because of his PTSD.
Wow.
So
Yeah. It's hard on a man. It's hard on the women. It's hard on the families. It's hard on the children.
it is.
You go through so much.
But my
for the
father
country.
was so, he felt like he had been given the gift of life when he survived all of that. And he got busy. He was from Lake Charles, Louisiana, and that's where he had his accounting business for 42 years. But he was director of civil defense for Calcasieu Parish.
Wow.
He was into all kinds of events, just everything. He was the president of the United States Civil Defense Council, and he just got busy, and partly because he was probably running away from some of those memories, he had to stay busy.
Yeah.
And then it was, he wanted to do something worthwhile with his life
Sure.
because of what he went through.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, this idea of service before self, right?
right.
Yeah. I get it. Just incredible. So his whole Merrill's Marauders, they were awarded a Congressional Gold Medal by Congress in 2020, just 3 years ago.
Right.
So that means somebody brought it up, and somebody said,
Somebody. Let me tell you about that.
yeah.
Well, for 20 years, I worked at sending letters to Congress for the cause of the Congressional Gold Medal. But I wasn't the only one. We had the Merrill's Marauders Association, and we had the Merrill's Marauders Proud Descendants Association. And we had people from all walks of life. The 75th Ranger Regiment,
Right.
they take their legacy from their designation from Merrill's Marauders.
Wow.
So the Merrill's Marauders was the origin of the 75th Ranger Regiment. And the effort that everyone made. I mean, we had lawyers and people from all walks of life write letters into Congress. And it took a long time to get this through. And I felt like a marauder that had marched 1,000 miles in the jungle to reach Michinaw.
Would have been the easy one, right?
Right. And because it took that long to get this through. And so just like the Marauders, we never gave up. And so I say mission accomplished.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you should be very proud that you were able to do that they got the recognition they so deserved.
And I have the diary, and wanted to say that the Congressional Gold Medal is housed in the Smithsonian.
Wow. Unbelievable. So your dad, is he from Lake Charles?
He's from Arizona. He's from,
Okay.
Phoenix, Arizona, and he graduated from the University of Arizona
Gotcha.
in Tucson.
Wow. So, and what was his rank in the...
He was a sergeant.
Okay.
And he got, I can't remember, I think a staff sergeant, but he didn't start out that way. A lot of people were killed or had diseases. There were more people killed by disease than actual
Most wars
warfare.
are, yeah.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to mention about the diseases, that so many people had amoebic dysentery. And what the Marauders didn't know at the time was that the Chinese boiled their water, and they used the rivers for latrines. Well, the Marauders were taking their canteens and filling them up in the rivers and putting halazone tablets in it. And they didn't know that the halazone did not kill the bacteria that caused amoebic dysentery. So many of them were sick, but they powered through it.
That's amazing. In the jungle, surrounded by, or not only about surrounded, but fighting the Japanese, most of the time not able to see them, sick with dysentery and mite fever. That had to have been a terrible, terrible experience. Just, wow. we are so lucky that we have not had to experience those things.
Well, that's part of my mission of writing this book, was to educate people
Right.
on what they went through.
Yeah.
Because nowadays we have penicillin.
That's right.
And penicillin, at Normandy, the boys had penicillin there, but the Marauders did not.
Wow. So they had to deal with it with their own.
Right.
own
Right.
way.
So
Yeah. Incredible. Larry W. Stevenson. He was a sergeant with Merrill's Marauders. His daughter, Linda S. Cunningham, has written a memoir from Larry's 1944 diary of Merrill's Marauders. The book is called The Marauder and His Daughter. What a beautiful writing. I'll show it one more time up on the thing. It comes out, there's a pre-sale November 11th through December the 17th. And then it goes on sale after the 17th.
No, it goes on sale on December the 10th. That's the
December
actual
the 10th. Oh,
launch
gotcha.
date. And the pre-sale begins on Veterans Day.
Gotcha.
And it's on Amazon, and just search on Amazon and under books and put Linda S. Cunningham. That's very important because there is a lot of Linda Cunninghams. It's a very common name. So it's Linda S. Cunningham, the Marauder and his daughter.
The Marauder and his daughter. Linda, thank you so much for coming. This is just a wonderful, wonderful, and not just historical document, but a love story, a story of survival, a story of endurance, a story of a veteran.
Right.
How apropos. We thank you for doing this, really do. I'm sure if your father were alive today, he would be thanking you too, but I'm also sure he'd be humbled. So thank you for doing this. Folks, if you get a chance, go to Amazon, look up Linda S. Cunningham and The Marauder and His Daughter. What a beautiful, beautiful thing. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
You're welcome.